Sure. Hi, everybody, and welcome. Today we are talking about the Partners in Promise Homeschooling Report. This is a report that is coming out from our 2022 survey results that were released in March of 2023. One of the big things that we realized is that the homeschooling community is one community that we have not specifically and intentionally reached out to. And so I want to do that with this paper. And we're doing it today with two dynamic military spouses that I want to introduce you to. The first is Sabrina Dalton. She is a Space Force spouse located in California. And Patricia Byrd is an Army veteran, an Army spouse, an autism mom located in DC, right? DC. My name is Crystal DeVoss Mahany. I'm an Army spouse located in Savannah, Georgia. It's gorgeous, still hot, a little rainy right now, but we're really hoping for cooler temperatures coming soon. So with that being said, thank you ladies so much for being here. Thank you to anybody who is viewing this recording. This again is going to be attached to the report review that I'll record separately. The three of us are all military family advocates. So one of the biggest things that we do is bring together, as PIP, as an organization, we bring together dynamic military spouses who are doing incredible things on our behalf for our community and for our kids. And of course, education is our number one priority for this organization. So maybe you're asking, why is PIP talking about homeschooling? Well, homeschooling families were just under 10% of our survey respondents. 9.5% of our survey responses indicated that they homeschool their children. That's a huge sect. It was a shock to us. It's a huge sect of our population that we just genuinely we didn't know that it was so big. So we spliced out the data. We took a really deep dive into what the homeschooling families responded with and what we're taking that data, and also just thinking about ways that we can better support military homeschool families. So Sabrina, I kind of want to start with you. If you wouldn't mind giving us a little background and telling us about how you got into homeschooling and what you want to share with military families.
Sure. So my name's Sabrina Dalton. Like she said, we're living in California. I'm a homeschooling mom of a 9-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 4-year-old this year. And yeah.
While she's saying that, I do want to point out that Sabrina is the lead author and lead researcher for a homeschooling guide that she did on behalf of the homeschooling community for military families that Five and Thrive has put together and has just released in August.
Sorry, Crystal, I'm gonna have to help him.
Okay, no problem.
How about Trish goes first?
Yes.
And then I'll come back.
Awesome. Talk to you in a second.
So I guess I'm going now.
Yes. Tell me
So
about what led to your decision to homeschool and all of those things.
sure. So as Crystal said, I am in Washington, D.C. area. I homeschooled my son for only a year and a half. What led me to that decision is I felt that the school system was failing my son at the time. We moved during COVID, and he had his education plan in place, thought that moving with the education plan would be smooth, but when you move from one state to another, it's completely different. So we started school and just started going backwards. And as a parent, it was hard to see him struggling. So the big thing that led to me homeschooling him was that he was in middle school, and middle school is hard as it is, and they weren't following his IEP, so his behavior started escalating. His mental health went down, and he's not a small kid. Now he's 5'11" and over 300 pounds. So imagine someone like that getting upset So the school, they would always get the resource officer involved. And I was afraid, for my son that um, at the time, 13-year-old, I couldn't imagine my 13-year-old having a record. So I made a tough decision because I had no intention of homeschooling my 13-year-old, my teenager. Um, so I went down rabbit hole after rabbit hole and did research. I, contacted people and talked to everyone I could, and I decided to pull them out. So that's how I got to homeschooling.
That's amazing. I mean, what a courageous decision, I just want to say, because one of the things like I talk about with families is to know your lane, and your lane is to be the mom, is to parent, is to love and to support and be there, but also taking on that role of educator. That's a huge deal. That's a huge amount of responsibility and stress. I can't imagine what all went in that, especially because he has different needs than a neurotypical child, and that had to have been quite daunting. um, what what would you say is what you learned the most about schooling your son at home during that time?
Um, well, we did a lot of, I don't know, called unschooling because he had been in the school system for so long. And it was a learning process for me too. So just kind of taking a step back and saying, hey, this was a stressful time for both you and me. So we got to get to know each other and figure out, how this is going to work out for us. So just being able to step back and spend that time with him and figure out how he learns. Although I've seen him, and as a mom, how your kid learns. So just being able to sit back and consider that. So for homeschooling, you think of a traditional school. We get up at 9 o'clock and we start, math and science, and it was not like that at all. I asked him. He was 13, so he had a lot to say as to how and what he wanted his homeschooling to look like. I asked him what subjects he wanted to do, so I let him lead the learning.
I love that. That had to be really empowering for him too.
Especially after the ordeal that he went through. It was very empowering. So trust me, I mean, it wasn't smooth sailing by any means because he was a teenager. He is a teenager, so we had our challenges, but I think that allowing him to choose, and because he was still in the school mindset, like, well, I need to do this and I need to do this. I'm like, no, this is your school, and we can figure out, what it is and what it looks like. So that's how we started and went forward with it.
That's so interesting too, because it in the public school system, it's literally called an individualized education plan, but it's not necessarily individualized, nor is it always student centered. But what you just described is like it's just the ideal. It's everything that we are striving for as parents in the traditional setting, that we've kind of, I hate to say this, but we fight for, we advocate for, and the ideal is supposed to be exactly what you just described, but so often it's you can have that as long as it still fits into the traditional structure. One of the things that I absolutely love about your story, Trish, is that it breaks the mold that if a parent or a family decides to homeschool, that it's forever, like it's indefinite. You commit to it, and you're right that our idea or perception of homeschooling is, sitting at a dining room table and everybody is, studiously working in their workbook, and it doesn't look like that generally, but we still have that assumption that it does. But what a wonderful thing that that isn't how it actually is, and parents get to really decide for themselves.
Right. Yeah. And so we only did it for a year and a half. That allowed him to, build his confidence because, he had lost a lot of the self-esteem that he had. So he was able to build his confidence, and he decided that he wanted to go back to school, which broke my heart. Although we were struggling, trying to get him to do his work again, a typical teenager. Like, are you sure you want to go back to school? And he said he did. So, I honored his wishes, but I made sure that I talked to the school before, we made that decision. I let the school understand what had happened and what he had gone through. And I was like, I don't want that to happen. I need it to be successful for him. I need it to be a positive experience. And so we were fortunate that the school system that we're in now, they worked with us. They allowed us to come do a tour, and they were completely ready, and I was impressed. So went back to school, and he's still in school, and he's happy. So.
I love that so much. I also want to point out that Trish wrote an article for Partners in Promise just a month or so ago, I think it was. So that will be linked somewhere in on our website. It does exist on our website, but we'll link it somewhere and attach it to Trish in our little convo. So Sabrina, are you good? How are the kids?
I'm back. That is the number one hazard of homeschooling kids, is that they're always around, and it's
Home.
because they're here. It's a standard caveat I always give, that like, I'm happy to hop on a call, I'm happy to have a meeting, and even something like this that I really want to do, my time is not necessarily my own. So I appreciate the flexibility, but that's a real situation that homeschool families have to manage. So it's real life.
I love it. I love it. And I'm all about authenticity, because who wants boring and fake? So back to Sabrina.
Okay.
So again, you're the lead author and researcher for the homeschooling guide that was put out by Five and Thrive just last month. I want to talk about your background in homeschooling and what led you to want to do that guide.
Okay, so I will say my husband and I are not we were not homeschooled. We are both products of a solid K through 12 public education. And homeschooling was just not something that I had ever considered. But we got to an assignment, and I started noticing all these families that were homeschooling, and there's just something alluring about their interconnectivity with each other in their family that I was really drawn to, and I was really curious about. Now, homeschooling is not how you create interconnectivity as a family. Like, that's not going to get you A to B, but it was just really interesting to see kids and siblings and multi-age groups just interacting well with each other, and kindly and inclusively. And I just got really interested in it. Then, kind of through a lot of life events, my daughter was in preschool, we were homeschooling preschool, and then we PCS, and I was very pregnant with our third child, and it was the winter, and I was like, well, I'm not sending her back to preschool because I'm about to have a baby, and I don't want that baby to get sick. And then we PCS, and I was like, well, I'm not driving somewhere to drop her off when I'm this pregnant, and I had a
lot going on. I don't want to.
Yeah, had a lot happening, and I was like, we're just going to keep homeschooling. And then we were coming up to kindergarten, and I was like, kindergarten isn't required in most states, because in some states the schooling age is 5, and it goes up, schooling age can start at 8 in other states. But in the particular state we were in, it was 6, which is first grade. So kindergarten is optional. And I was like, it's a get out of jail free card. Like, honestly, we can just try homeschooling this year and see what happens. And if it's awful and it's horrible for our family and we don't like it, I can take her to the school down the street any day of the week, and they will take her. So I thought, let's try it. Well, that was January of 2020. And then COVID hit. And I was like, by the time we got to August, I was like, yeah, I'm not sending her to school in this environment. We'll just keep her home. And, I had had that little newborn babe by then. And, I was like, we're all going to be here. We're just going to figure this out. And it just was an enriching experience for us. Like, it just really aligned with our values as a family, our goals as a family. I really liked teaching my kids. I just get a lot of joy out of it. And they were doing well. Like, my kids were thriving in that environment, and we were part of an amazing homeschool community on our installation in Massachusetts. And it just kept working for us. A couple of years later, we're PCSing across the country to California. And it's the first time that I was like really digging into homeschool laws and how I was gonna transition from homeschooling in Massachusetts with very specific requirements to California with very specific requirements. And it just irked me to no end that I couldn't find a place where all that information was consolidated for military families, with having to go to all these outside organizations. And I felt like the people who were supposed to help me were not knowledgeable and they weren't helpful. And I was really kind of going it alone. And I was like crowdsourcing help. And it just bothered me. So we get to California, I figure out how to homeschool here, but that like lingering annoyance just kind of kept sitting with me. And then I just had like a epiphany, or I was just so irritated. I'm like helping other families figure out how to homeschool in California, and I'm doing this work. And I was introduced to Five and Thrive through a presentation they were doing for Space Force spouses. And I was like, you guys don't have information about homeschooling, but I'd love to help you get it. Can we work together? And they were like, absolutely. So that was in March. And by August, we had the Five and Thrive homeschool guide published on their website. And the guide aims to be a comprehensive place that is a living document. So we have the homeschooling laws for all 50 states plus OCONUS requirements. We have testimonials in there to inspire and encourage families, frequently asked questions, resources, things that you would want to know as a homeschooling family. But we also connect homeschooling families with their installation school liaison officer, which is the official source that we should be asking education-based questions to for our kiddos. And we also connect families to community partners, everything from like the local base library has a homeschool book club that you can join to, the state gives out money, or homeschool families are entitled to financial, not financial aid, but financial support for their homeschooling endeavor. They're a school choice state. And here's the links on how you get registered for that, how you can get connected to it. So hopefully it's bridging that gap to get families the information they need so that they're not having to go it alone and just figure things out for themselves.
I just want to say it's not a hope that it's bridging you absolutely did bridge that gap. And I want to recognize that it was an idea in March and your idea was published in August. Like, that's a very short amount of time for a massive project that you did all of the heavy lifting for with the research and just the authoring. Like, I just want to acknowledge that's a huge lift. That's incredible. It usually takes organizations a year to get those things out because there's so much involvement. So mad kudos to you. And I want to tell our audience how I know you too. Because who doesn't want to know a good story? I met Trish on LinkedIn through a mutual friend, a longtime friend of ours. Trish is getting into PR, public relations, or HR, getting into HR. And one of our mutual HR friends connected us, and I had a conversation with Trish over FaceTime. And by the end of it, I was in tears because, as a military special needs mom, it's hard to find those people who really understand what this is like as a journey. Don't start crying because I will too. I can't
I'm
do.
not.
Um, it's really hard. And I'm not like a naturally hopeful person, but you talking about your son, who's a few years older than mine, it just struck me that I needed to hear what your story and your experience as an autism mom. I so needed to hear that. And I really am thankful that you've been willing to open yourself up to the PIP audience, because it, we need that connection. And then I met Sabrina because as I was doing the research for the homeschooling paper, which by the way, I know nothing about homeschooling other than the data that PIP has received and the research that I did to write this issue paper. And because of the Five and Thrive guide, Five and Thrive connected Sabrina and I, and she literally blew my mind, just punched holes straight into these assumptions that I had made. And what I realized was I was writing this issue paper still through the prism of traditional education, right? Public school, this idea that it culminates in a high school diploma is false. It's not true for homeschooling families, but I still was filtering the information through that lens of, well, the diploma is the end all, but it really isn't. And so she helped me to see that. And in the same light that Trish did, help me to see that homeschooling is not what I think a lot of people just naturally perceive or just, assume of what it is, but that it looks different for every family. And especially for military families, yes, you can find homeschooling groups, but are they highly mobile? How much are they going to relate to the life that we live, because they are probably going to be static. And public education, traditional education, works in the same way. It works through this assumption that these kids are likely going to remain in the same state, in the same area for the duration of their entire K through 12 schooling. But that's not the case. So we as a military community don't really fit in that mold anyway. And then there's these extra nuggets of our population that are trying to work within that system and the difficulties of that. And homeschooling truly is an alternative way to educate our families that maybe they hadn't considered before. So what I'm hoping to do is to share that gift that you have both given me of just opening my eyes and opening my mind to there are other possibilities. And it's not just, public education isn't the only option for our families. And to educating kids with special needs and who are neurodiverse, it is going to look different, but it is possible in so many ways. Sabrina brought up a good resource. Some states have these financial resources to help parents. So that's a huge burden of that support. And the other thing that we want to do in this paper is to better recognize how we as an organization can support homeschooling families in our military community, and perhaps find out more information and the resources to support them and to support their the learning differences of their kids as well. So I'm excited, and I'm thankful that you both agreed to join me in this conversation. Sabrina, last question that I want to ask you. Since, PIP's focus is military kids and special education, what would you tell families who are considering homeschooling?
So I think Trisha's story is actually pretty illuminating of that. So something that I really latched onto when she was talking about that was self-directed learning. She really went with what her kids were interested in. And I think that that's a huge blessing of homeschooling, because you really can kind of lock into what are things your kids love, or what is around you in wherever you're assigned that is really something you want to know more about. out. So when we lived in Massachusetts, we lived right outside of Boston. Actually, we lived literally between Lexington and Concord, and right along the Minuteman Trail that the oh my gosh, now I'm gonna forget everything that the British Army and the rebels. This is not a good look.
The history lesson. That's
Yes, the British
unexpected.
Army and the rebels were fighting, from first shot heard around the world. Like we lived right there. And so I was like, well, what a great opportunity to teach early American history. Did like to my kindergartner. So but what we were able to do is like I found a great curriculum that was, literature based that I really liked, that I was able to build all these field trip opportunities to take my kids to see where the Boston Tea Party was, to take them to the museum that's in Lexington, Massachusetts, that talks about the first shot heard around the world, to actually like see the North Church where, Paul Revere's ride and stuff. And it made their learning really concrete, and it was convenient because we lived there. I could go do that very easily. Now in California, I live and see the ocean from my house. And so we do a lot of learning about ocean animals. I'm not an ocean lover. Like that's not a joy I'm not a beach person. I'm a mountain person. So like, yes, I live this close to the beach, but it doesn't like, I'm not thrilled to go to the beach, but my kids are learning about ocean animals constantly because we're tide pooling. We're at the aquarium. Like it would be silly for me to not take advantage of where we're living, where we're currently assigned, and making sure that their learning is like in holistic of their environment. And that is a great thing about homeschooling. It doesn't have to be forever. And I have friends who are like tried and true homeschoolers. Like this is it for them. They love homeschooling. And the best wisdom I got was from one of those other moms. And she was like, look, like I love homeschooling my 4 kids. I'm very passionate about this. This is important to us. But if we got stationed overseas and they had the opportunity to go to like an international school and be around kids who were from all these different countries and have that experience, I'd put them in that school because it's an enriching environment for them. It's to their benefit to be in that type of environment. And you can just pull your kid out when you move or when it's not working for you anymore. And even now my kids, I went from homeschooling full time to in California, we're a part of it's a public charter school that does hybrid homeschooling, and my kids get to spend 2 days on campus doing really cool project-based learning in mixed age classrooms in an environment that I think is so, so good for them. And then they come home and spend 3 days with me doing schoolwork that is from curriculum that I pick that I'm really passionate about. And so it's like a best of both worlds. I think I have best of both worlds. And so I think it's not forever. It doesn't have to be forever. It can be forever. But really, I would encourage families to just think creatively about what exists at every assignment and how you want to interact with the community at that assignment, and what feels right for that season of life. And that might look like homeschooling for a couple of years. And it also might look like we homeschooled for a couple of years and now they need to be in a traditional 5-day-a-week school for whatever reason.
It's interesting in this conversation. What Trish said too, and Sabrina, you illuminated too, is like, I think about what is the most important thing that my 7th grader is learning right now. When I get reports back from the school that he's, not doing his work in class, even with prompts, that doesn't tell me anything, right? Yeah. However, because I've been down this road before, Trish, what's next. And I already know what's coming because I've been through it with different school districts. So how much is this important for his learning to be in this brick and mortar? What is he benefiting from? And what are my short and long-term educational goals for him? And is that being met in the public school? So you both have really opened my eyes to, listen, I'm not going to take on homeschooling, but I can look at it from the prism of making it of not only ensuring that, Trish, what happened to your son doesn't happen to him or any other child, helping, like being a part of that advocacy, but it helps me to look at what he is experiencing and how to advocate him for him in a way that is individualized, so he does feel supported. Because if he was getting bullied, I would never know, because he's still limited verbally. I can tell when he's had a bad day from how he gets off the bus, and he can now tell me, he told me the other day he got mad at school. That's all I know. So if he is experiencing what your son has experienced, I have to be, it's almost like we have the spidey sense.
Yeah.
We have to be a little bit more sensitive to those things, because if I'm encouraging him to be in a gen ed environment for a portion of his day, but it's not beneficial to him, what is he gaining? And measuring that, would it be more productive if he went on a field trip and got to experience something historic versus sitting in a classroom and hearing about it, which it's not that interactive? And is he gonna commit that to memory, or he's just gonna he's in his own world thinking of his own thing? So I don't know. You guys have just blown my mind and really helped me to think about education in such a different way. And I hope that the PIP audience can see that homeschooling is a really great opportunity, and it's an option. It's a viable option to educate our babies. And it's not impossible, because we have amazing advocates like the both of you who have done so much to share your story and to put information out to the greater audience. And so I'm just thankful to you both. So with that, I will conclude. Do either of you have any kind of final thoughts do you want anything you want to add or share with our audience, Trish?
Well, I was thinking, whenever I went into homeschooling, I had no idea how long it would be. I was ready to homeschool until my son graduated from high school, but he decided and he was ready to go back to traditional school. So, I was there to support him in that decision. It broke my heart a little bit, although we were struggling to get stuff done. But that's what he wanted, and I'm always there to support and make sure, like you were saying, you don't know what they're getting when they're in the public school, but you do know your child. So you just have to always be there to support their needs. So
To pay attention to that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Sabrina,
Yeah.
any parting words?
No, I just think I think that intuition sense is really important. And even though this is our 5th year of homeschooling, it's still a year by year decision. Is this working for us? Does it align with our values? It doesn't make sense in our season of life. And does it make sense for each of my kids? With 3 kids, they each have very different needs. It might not work for 1 or 2 or all 3 of them. And I think, the PIP audience is, like you said, a spidey sense on how did the day go. You also can kind of sense when something's not working, or when it's working really well, when everyone's happy. So no, I feel like I really appreciate Trisha's story, because it's not, it doesn't have to be forever, and it can be so intimidating that it does have to be forever. And even I have to remind myself that I can hold loosely to homeschooling, that it can bring us joy and be enriching for us. And also one day it might not be, and that's really not a comment on me or anything else or my kids. It just stopped working, and that's okay.
I think you both touch on this, that I'm just going to say it, that because of the strength they have been given by you as their mothers.
Mm.
They have that confidence and their ability to self-advocate for themselves in any setting. Like, it's an amazing gift that you're giving your kids that I am just thrilled that I get to be in the same space as you two. So thank you so much. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you to Sabrina and Trish. I hope that this has given you some information, certainly some things to think about, and take a look at their links, take a look at the homeschooling guide, take a look at Trisha's article that she wrote for PIP, hear her story, and thank you so much for being with us.